I think everyone's getting really excited about the railway coming to the Scottish borders. After 45 years, we're finally seeing rail transport in the Scottish borders again. So as you can imagine, lots of work going on to look at how we can make these opening celebrations a really, really memorable experience. And we're trying to hit not just national coverage, but actually have an international profile for what we see as absolutely central to the future of the Scottish borders. But within that, we also know that we really want to make this a set of celebrations that local people are involved in, and that local people can get a real sense of celebration and satisfaction for their communities as well. You can imagine everybody would love to be on those first few trains that run on this new railway line, the longest new railway line since Victorian times, I think. And so the demand is likely to be absolutely huge, and we were trying to find a way of making it fair for people. So a golden ticket approach, where people actually nominate other individuals, seemed like the fairest and most open way to do things, because although there are going to be three trains running on the golden ticket day, the Saturday the 5th of September, there's only 160 tickets for each of those trains. And so, of course, we don't think that'll meet demand, but we think this is the fairest way to do things. The council just approved yesterday at its meeting a Borders Railway Celebration Fund. And what we're hoping is that communities across the borders, not just along the railway corridor, but communities from across the borders will take the chance to apply for a grant to actually help make celebrations happen at that weekend, but also further on into the year as well.
It's interesting to reflect that so much of what we're getting now really goes back to the original Scott Wilson report in 1999, 2000. A lot of the elements of it got set in stone, and while there were many good things in the Scott Wilson report, and it's led on to what we're going to get today, there were some strange omissions. They looked at all kinds of different options about where the railway should terminate. And the one they didn't look at, surprisingly, was Melrose. And Melrose, the hotspot of borders tourism, a couple of miles beyond Tweedbank, they didn't look at going just to Melrose. I think that was unfortunate. They didn't look at an express service from Edinburgh to Gala and Tweedbank, not making so many stops in Midlothian, and a separate inner suburban, more frequent service out to Gore Bridge. And that's a very common pattern of operation for railways out from major cities in Britain. But they didn't look at that, and we still don't know why they didn't look at it. And I think that was a loss. And then coming up to more recent times, it was always envisaged that it was going to be a single track railway with passing loops, and that's fair enough. I think all campaigners accept that. There's not enough traffic for it to be double track throughout. But when the specification was coming through about 10 years ago, it was only going to be 9.5 miles of double track out of the total new build of 30.5 miles. And a lot of us felt, well, that's not enough in terms of the reliability of the service and the buffer you need to make sure it's reasonably reliable. And at that stage, there were some very visionary people in Transport Scotland, and effectively they agreed with campaigners and said, we need to squeeze out the amount of double track, and that'll enable us to have a faster and more reliable service. And that happened, but then, of course, it got cut back again. So we're in this situation where the infrastructure is very tight, and then we had really the scandal that thereafter Transport Scotland decided that all the new road over bridges over the single track sections of the railway would only be built to single track rail width. So if we want to build a double track railway in the future, or extend the existing loops, it's going to cost vastly more than it would have done if all this had been done while the railway was being built. And it's a classic example of penny wise, pound foolish, and I think there are going to be regrets about that in the future. Has to be said, it's not just a problem with the Borders Railway, it's kind of almost like a British disease, this short-termism. But it's ironic when you see elements of the railway have really been pared back, and yet this railway scheme also involves building 10 kilometres of new roads in the likes of Heriot and Fountainhall, and of course the new way underneath the Edinburgh City bypass. These new roads have been gold-plated, they've been built to the best national standards, and yet key elements of the railway have really been pared back. Now, that's just not sensible, but that's the way the world works at the moment, I'm afraid.
The Scottish Borders Business Forum open meeting for Borders businesses was well attended, plenty of interest shown and a number of speakers on hand to deliver information. I'll be bringing you a flavour of the meeting over the next few episodes, starting with Abellio's Mike Kean, who began by giving the assembled a little background on the Dutch company who will run trains in Scotland for the next 10 years.
We are the private arm of the Dutch Railway. We are owned 100% by the Dutch Railway, and a lot of what we do and our ethos and approach comes from the Dutch Railway. And that ethos and approach really centres around railway as being a community service. Railway is providing a vital utility to communities, and obviously railway being a massive enabler of growth, prosperity and the ability for people to move. We have at the centre of our company values and ethos connecting people from door to door. So it's not just about the railway, it's about further outside of the railway. When we looked at the bid, we recognised very clearly, and we were told very clearly by Transport Scotland and the stakeholders that we engaged with, that Borders was extremely important. And it was extremely important to start it well, but also to sustain that growth. And what you see both in the blueprint, but also in the launch event, is a good start, and it will be a good start. But what we're very focused on is keeping that growth sustained. And for us, that means doing the basics right, running a good, regular, high-performing service. And then once that's established and running, pushing the borders of the railway, the Borders Railway, further. And there's a few initiatives which I'll talk to you about how we do that. The first thing to say, what trains will be running? Everybody seems to ask me what trains will be running, so I'll run you through it. We're running diesel units. We're running 158 diesel units. They are a very good outer urban commuting stock. One of our key challenges with Borders is that balance between tourism and commuter, between the local community and the wider community and the tourists that wish to come to Borders. So what we'll do to that rolling stock is we'll refurbish it. We'll move it into what we call a tourist specification. So it will feel spacious. The seats will align with the windows so people can see the view. Most of you that will travel on railways, normally when you look out the window, you either don't have a window because your seat's not aligned with it. And we find that's a really key, unique in making it feel like a different experience, raising the experience of that journey. We'll have more space for luggage. One of the key things we do is we take the staff that will be on that train and we retrain them. And we retrain them in a very specific way. We retrain them to be what we call tourist ambassadors. So they become educated about the local region, that they can give out leaflets and information. And as they become more proficient, they can give out recommendations and talk about the local area and talk about the attractions. Most tourists, when they travel to Edinburgh, are there for between 2 and 4 days. Most tourists, when they travel to Scotland, want to have an out-of-city experience. It's extremely difficult in Scotland to go to the Highlands. It's a day trip at absolute minimum, and if you go by rail, it's probably an overnight trip. Borders is an amazing opportunity to capture that tourist market and to give people an experience that's manageable in a day or a half day, depending on what they want to do. And I think that's one of the unique opportunities of Borders. You will capture a huge tourist market, if it's sold and promoted properly, that want to experience the more rural Scotland, as well as experiencing Edinburgh and Glasgow and the more urban Scotland. And that, again, is a key focus for us.